is the City and County of Honolulu Source Reduction Working Group meeting number 3. Hopefully those that are being present in or online and in person can see my screen, but please let us know if you're having any trouble. So today, our meeting is going to be held both in person and virtually through that MS Teams link that was provided in the agenda. My name is Lindsay Lopez, and I'll be the main facilitator for this meeting. And as you can see, I am attending virtually today. I am joined by a couple of my colleagues. I've got both John Padre and Emily Stone in the Kapolei Hale Conference Room A. And then I have another colleague, Jennifer McCrae, who's joining me virtually online. So between the 4 of us, we should be able to help you with anything that you need. The date is November 28th, 2023. Please put your phones and microphones on silent. And for those in the room, restrooms are located down the hall and to the right. And we are recording the meeting for note-keeping purposes. I'd like to call this meeting to order. All right. So, Emily, if you could please take roll call.
Okay. Haley Cook.
Here.
Quinn Vittum.
Here, thanks.
Alan Evans.
Here.
Tina Yamaki. Lauren Zerbal.
Here. Hi, guys.
Amy Brinker.
Here.
Lene Ichinotsubo.
Here.
Jessica Liorna. Mike O'Keefe. Nicole Chatterson.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we just have a quorum. So if anyone leaves, then we will not have a quorum. Hopefully we have a couple that join. And if you have people that join, we do need to take note of when they arrive. Emily, if you can try to do that.
Okay.
So let's move along and take a look at the agenda. The full agenda was provided on the website and in the working group's email that was sent out. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. We do have a number of items to cover today. However, most of these items are informational only, and there's really only one item today that has an actionable element, and that is the item that will have public testimony invited. When we reach that item, and when we have that moment, each oral testimony will have 2-minute limit. Any questions on the agenda? Okay. So we are here at the approval of the minutes from the last source reduction working group meeting number 2 that we had. This is the one actionable item today. So we're going to start with any public testimony on this item. And this is the one item that we're inviting public testimony today. All other items are going to be just informational only today. Are there any people that have signed up for public testimony in the room or online? If you are online and you are intending to do that, if you could please indicate in the chat that you would like to testify today, that would be helpful at this time. Is there anyone in the room that has registered either before or during the meeting, Emily?
No one registered.
No.
Okay, and Jen, are you seeing anyone online that has indicated their interest in testifying?
I do not see anyone.
Okay, then I think we can move on to the general discussion of the meeting minutes, since there are no people that are here to testify about the minutes. Do any of the working group members have comments on the meeting minutes from meeting number 2? And you should have gotten those in the packet for the meeting, and it's also on the website. No? No comments? If you do have comments, please go ahead and just take yourself off mute or raise your hand or. Okay. Then I would like to ask if we can move forward with motioning. Oh, hold on, we have Lauren here.
Hi, sorry about that. My internet went out.
No worries, Lauren. Are you hearing us now again?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Okay, we just passed the part of public testimony. There was no public testimony, so we're in the middle of asking any members if they have comments on meeting number 2 minutes.
No, I don't have any.
All right. Is there a member that would make the motion to vote on approval of the minutes?
I can motion.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, all members in favor of approving the minutes for meeting number 2, say aye, and please raise your hand as well so that we can get use the raise hand function, please.
I guess.
Aye from Amy.
Okay, it looks like we have 6 ayes. Then I would like to note that SRWG meeting number 2 minutes have been approved. Excellent. So now we are going to move on to the permitted interaction group presentations, and that is the most of the agenda items today are involved around the permitted interaction group presentations. It covers the next 3 agenda items. And these are informational items only today. They will not have an actionable element today. And so let's go over a quick kind of introduction of this. In the SRWG meeting number 2, we decided to form permitted interaction groups, otherwise known as PIGs or PIGs, for the following 3 topics: construction and demolition waste, photovoltaic panel waste, product packaging, and food waste or organics. And after meeting number 2, each of these PIGs met over the course of several sessions individually. And today we get the opportunity to bring back the findings and considerations that were developed as a part of those PIG meetings. I just want to remind everyone that per Sunshine Law, we cannot discuss or make any decisions about these findings until after the PIGs are formally dissolved, and that happens after today's meeting. So therefore, any discussion and decision making on these items will take place next week at SRWG meeting number 4. And you'll be getting an agenda for that very soon. But again, we need to hold discussion and decision making on those until next meeting. So today is really just a nice overview, bringing the entire working group back together and letting folks know kind of a summary of what was discussed and the general considerations that were brought forth by each of these PIGs. So the first one that we're going to talk about next is the PIG presentation for the construction and demolition waste PIG. For each of these, we followed kind of a similar roadmap where we identified what the topic was, talked a little bit about the current state of C&D waste for this PIG, and then talked about some challenges and opportunities. And then we decided or defined a list of considerations that the PIG wanted to bring forward to the bigger group to think about. For this PIG, we came up with 6 considerations, and they're listed out here. We're going to be talking through each of them a little bit more, but they are: seek out funding strategies, adopt a diversion regulation ordinance, adopt a deconstruction ordinance, streamline permitting process for C&D and concrete waste recyclers, establish transfer stations or stockpiling areas for C&D waste, and educate and involve stakeholders. So what is the current state of C&D waste on Oahu? We've talked quite a bit about this at a number of meetings, but we do have this upcoming major problem where the PBT landfill is currently the primary disposal location for C&D waste, and it is closing in the next 3 to 5 years. So there is this rapid need to find another location for the portion of the C&D waste that is requiring some sort of a disposal option. The city environmental department is they have a number of plans that they're undergoing kind of at the same time as this project, looking at how they're going to manage C&D waste. They do want to reduce the amount of C&D waste just through source reduction itself. That way there is less of an amount of this material they have to manage. So that's where this project really comes in, hoping to identify some solutions that could result in source reduction. City is also looking to divert some of this waste to H-Power. The city currently is in the process of identifying a site for a new landfill that may accommodate C&D waste. And another consultant is currently writing a C&D management plan for the city. And the city is seeking policy that goes upstream and contributes to a reduction in waste generation rather than focusing on policy that impacts the transporter of waste via disposal ban. So the overall goal here is to minimize C&D waste going to the landfill. So keeping that in mind as we move forward looking at some of this information. This is the latest of waste composition and just overall quantities generated of C&D material. In 2021, C&D landfill was 13% of the waste stream, and the C&D amount recycled was 15% of the total waste stream. So between the landfilled and recycled component, that is a very large chunk of the overall waste stream that if you can minimize through source reduction, there is a large opportunity to make some big impact there. Some of the things as part of the Integrated Solid Waste Management Plan from 2019, there was also a waste characterization study that was included in that plan. And one of the things that this PIG group talked a little bit about was, how much of the material was C&D in that waste characterization study, and it's just about 15% of the material that is currently being disposed based on that characterization study. And then another, large, excuse me, item was the pallets. And you can see that those are they're about 6% of that material as well, of the overall amount. So some things to keep in mind. That was one of the things, as you're moving forward and getting through the details of what you want to do, these sorts of studies and data could be helpful thinking about some of the logistics and quantities and things such as that. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges and the opportunities in addressing C&D waste. After many of these, you can kind of see if it's like an industry regulatory or other challenge, and that's in brackets. We've tried to define those just to kind of categorize them a little bit. But this was the initial list that was discussed. So challenges, just challenging the norms. It's always hard to make a behavior change or a process change, especially when industry is really used to doing things, a certain way. There's also, our group talked a lot about the barrier to entry. There's can be quite a bit of difficulty in getting the proper permitting for both collection and processing. So that's a regulatory challenge. Limited space for sorting, recovering, and stockpiling or storing materials, and the need to be in places that reduce transportation costs. So, that goes to places that are permitted already to do this sort of operation, They have limited space and probably could utilize more. There's more needed to do more sorting, more storage, more recovery. The challenge of re-educating architects, designers, builders, contractors, demolition crews, and others. So like with any behavior change, that's something that you're going to need to work on through engagement. There is some resistance in the building industry around increased regulation. Also worry about cost of, adding more regulation, how that might impact that part of the industry as well. Concern for just increasing the overall cost of construction. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a list of opportunities that the group identified. There are large volumes of this material produced that will need a new destination when the PVT landfill is closed. So there is that potential for that large impact. The increased volume will allow for investment in better processing equipment. So if you were able to, really get kind of a dedicated source or committed source of C&D, you could, provide enough feedback and, support for investment in that new processing equipment. And there are many opportunities for material reuse. There's many different case studies that we discovered in this group's research that places are doing a variety of things for material reuse. Other good case studies in counties and states to learn from, and seeking policy that goes upstream and contributes to a reduction in waste generated rather than focusing on policy that impacts waste haulers via disposal ban. And looking for great local partners. So these are all, the challenges and opportunities that this group identified so far. The current C&D strategies on Oahu, so there is a Senate Bill 431 that requires state and county to have priority offer selections for competitive procurements of C&D services based on offers recycling of C&D materials and the use of recycled materials. It requires state building codes to incorporate the International Green Construction Code and set specified targets for recycling, reuse, donation, and resale of non-hazardous construction waste. So this is something, that is part of the current things that are happening in this location with C&D. A collection site, a Kapaha Kuari pilot project. So there's this current pilot project going on where the city will collect and redistribute recovered materials and household items in collaboration with Reuse Hawaii. And this is an opportunity to, learn about what could be needed as part of a larger project such as this. And it's a great opportunity to just test, this as a potential option. There's that C&D management plan being developed that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And so, a lot of good current thought, a lot of people thinking about this topic currently. And so now, what are the things that could be done to potentially supplement that? So that is this list of 6 considerations that this PIG came up with that I read earlier. Aloha, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. So sorry I'm late.
No worries. Gave me a chance to take a drink. All right. So we're going to move on to the first, a little bit more about the first strategy. And that one is to seek out funding strategies. Current challenge is establishing new deconstruction, diversion, and recycling programs or infrastructure. All these things require money. And luckily, there is some major opportunity out there. There are currently millions of dollars in EPA federal funding for environmental waste reduction solutions. This could be utilized for a variety of things. We could fund the expansion for the Kapa'a Transfer Station Pilot Project Program. It could incentivize contractors to divert waste via, discounts on recycling tipping fees or other things. It could fund the education and outreach that would be necessary to help with this behavior change and help get architects and developers and others on board with, some of this change. So there's lots of different ways this funding could be utilized. It should definitely be a part of whatever, programs or other considerations are move forward, because there is this significant amount of funding available, and this is exactly the kind of projects that funding is targeted at. So solution here is that the city can apply for grants or build partnerships that support and seek grant funding. So you're going to see this common thread in each of the pigs, but it's certainly an important one to start with. The second consideration that was defined by this group, at least for future consideration, is to adopt a diversion ordinance. The current challenge is this lack of regulation for diversion. We've got some examples. The County of Hawaii requires a solid waste management plan for developments. Their plan identifies waste types, proposed waste reduction, recycling, disposal methods, and impacts to county waste management facilities, and then mitigation measures to minimize impacts. In a state of Hawaii, a licensed engineer architect must write the plan for that county. Another example is the city of Austin. They're tackling this in a slightly different way for building permits that have a square footage greater than or equal to 5,000 square feet. They require this reuse, a more than 50% reuse or recycling of C&D debris, and it's for commercial and multi-family demolitions as well. So there are a variety of different ways that existing counties are tackling this, different types of diversion ordinances. We came up with a bunch more too, and those can certainly go in a report or be discussed at the next meeting, but these were the two examples listed here. So the solution is the City and County of Honolulu ordinance could require diversion, segregation, recycling, and a reuse of C&D waste through the preparation of a solid waste management plan, identification of licensed waste haulers, similar to like Orange County, North Carolina. There's a link that you can get more information on there, requiring a set percentage of waste to be diverted from landfills, offsetting cost of recycling or reuse. So these are, potential additional considerations for this item. So a little bit on demolition versus deconstruction, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So demolition is demolishing a building or structure to take it down and, like using a wrecking ball and things like that. Whereas deconstruction is a much more systematic effort to salvage materials for reuse and recycling. There are many studies that show, that when you do deconstruction, it actually results in more quality jobs than in demolition. As you can see here, it just kind of shows a little bit about deconstruction jobs, warehouse jobs, retail jobs, value-adding jobs, job training, and other things here. So something to also consider as you move forward. The third consideration this PIG came up with was to adopt a deconstruction ordinance. And the other last was a diversion ordinance. This is a deconstruction ordinance. So current challenge is the lack of regulation for deconstruction. An example of a city that has had a very positive deconstruction ordinance is the city of Portland, which requires projects seeking a demolition permit to fully deconstruct for single dwelling structures that were built before 1940. And certified deconstruction contractors are required to do this workforce training program so that they are following the deconstruction best practices and such that have been defined. So the potential solution could be that the city and county of Honolulu could require deconstruction. They could focus on large buildings that would be recommended to be targeted for the larger impact. Residential projects could also be regulated since many old single-family homes in Oahu are demolished to reconstruct new homes. So that's another approach of looking at, the older homes. All right. So number 4 is streamlining the permitting process for C&D and concrete waste recyclers. The current challenge is the permitting process for C&D and concrete waste recyclers is a barrier to setting up new recycling facilities. It can take a lot of time, and it can be very difficult to obtain those permits. So a solution could potentially be that industry stakeholders could work with the state to streamline and simplify that permitting process and provide online educational materials for interested permittees to make it easier. Consideration number 5 is to establish transfer stations and stockpiling areas for C&D waste. So again, the current challenge here is that there is this large limiting factor for diverting C&D waste, and that is the lack of space that is required for stockpiling, sorting, and storing materials. So construction projects currently need to stockpile C&D materials on site until a receiver is identified. And the timeline for demand does not always align with the supply of the C&D waste. So, as you have a variety of materials that perhaps you've even, segregated, unless you have someone who immediately needs that, now you have to store all this material until you can find somebody that's interested. So that could be certainly a challenge. So potential solutions are stakeholders could potentially establish on-site stockpiling and sorting areas at potential future C&D process facilities or at the landfill. They could establish a network of C&D transfer stations around the island to store materials. And this would minimize hauling fees by locating stations strategically around the island. The city does have another consultant working on a C&D management plan that may determine additional recommendations for new and current facilities, processes, and operations for stockpiling and sorting C&D waste. So that should be, something that should be considered as things move forward and as that plan advances. So that brings us now to number 6, which is educating and involving stakeholders. So again, back to the current challenge is the lack of education and knowledge in the industry for the reuse and recycling and diversion methods needed to advance C&D source reduction. These potential solutions are the education program for reuse and recycling and diversion methods, have an education program before, during, and after establishing new policies and ordinances and transfers about the transfer system networks, and adoption and education of a core value system for the city. So during this, one of the meetings of this permitted interaction group, we had a really excellent presentation. And one of the things that was like a big lesson learned was that, the Hawaiian cultural value system was essential for success of this Kamehameha School's demolition rebuild project. And in that project, they diverted over 90% of the C&D waste. So again, that connection, having common core value system was really, really important. Another lesson learned from that big project was, having information on how to handle materials that are going to be generated in large quantities. For this project, it was concrete, and that would have, been a little. They had to kind of learn on the fly. So having that information about what they could actually use concrete for would have been helpful if it was readily available. They also had to use their own resources and money and connections to make the project successful. So, hopefully as this becomes more of a practice, that becomes easier and you don't have to have your own resources, money, and connections, but again, that's part of this education and stakeholder engagement process. And so kind of tying this back to that consideration number one, which was looking for funding, perhaps, there are portions of that EPA funding that's available that are specifically, targeted at the stakeholder engagement and outreach process. So perhaps, kind of tying these two considerations together, some of that grant funding that you go after, you might try to go after some that target at education. All right, so that concludes the first PIG summary. And we're going to move on to the next agenda item now, which is the second PIG presentation. And this one involves photovoltaic or PV panel waste. All right, so the roadmap for this PIG topic, the topic was PV panel waste. Talked a lot about how much of this waste there is and what the current state of the PV panel waste on Oahu, and how Oahu can handle PV panel waste. We also identified some challenges and opportunities, and as you probably saw from the last presentation, we tried to make considerations for those challenges and opportunities. That's how those considerations evolved. We talked a lot about some current strategies, and then the 7 considerations that this group came up with were seek out funding strategies, establish sites for collection, staging, and processing, establish a statewide stewardship program, incentivization and education for operation and management of PV panels, subsidizing shipping costs to ship PV panel waste to the mainland, exploring extended producer responsibility, and supporting and incentivizing secondary market program for reuse. So let's continue here. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, a lot of the PIGs, they wanted to start with, how much of this waste is really out there? And so this group did quite a bit of research. More than 1/3 of Oahu's homes are powered currently by solar or PV panels. And as of 2021, there are 3.86 million modules that have been installed on Oahu, both that's inclusive of residential and commercial. In 2021, there was 225,000 tons of PV materials installed throughout the state of Hawaii. This is about 8.8% of the municipal solid waste and C&D waste in the state. So there is, a large chunk of this material out there. And certainly as things change, there could be even more. So what is the current state of this material? PV panels, they contain a lot of different kinds of hazardous materials, and these materials pollute the environment if they're improperly handled. The anticipated lifespan of a PV panel is approximately 25 years, but that requires proper installation and maintenance. And also, however, you have to keep in mind that the technology is changing too. So sometimes before panels are even out of their lifespan, they're being replaced. Installers encourage owners to replace panels before their lifespan is even overdue because of these new technologies. So it looks like there's about 10 to 15 years left on some panels. Currently, there is no way to recycle PV panel waste in Hawaii. All of this waste is shipped to the mainland for recycling. Functional panels can be resold to secondary markets in Hawaii, so there is some reuse opportunities, just not recycling. And there is this big upcoming wave of PV panel waste with greater growth in the future, with the various renewable energy goals, 100% for the state of Hawaii by 2045. There are going to be even more PV panels in the system. So, having a plan or at least a phased plan where, this is front and center on some solutions is certainly advisable. So how can Oahu handle the PV panel waste now? Talked a little bit just now about the recycling, and that has to currently go to the mainland. So there's, collection of the material, land transport, storage, sorting. You have to have frame removal, packaging. There's this ocean transport that has to happen, which is has very high shipping costs. And then once it gets to the mainland, then you have to then transport it even further to the processing facility where the recycling is done in one of the processing facilities in the mainland. So there are valuable materials in PV panel waste, but it is a very complex process to isolate and harvest these materials from the old panels. And all panels are manufactured differently. So even if you have, a good methodology for some, it does need a little bit of customization to do that deconfiguration of it. The other possibility for handling PV panel waste in the recycling or reuse kind of area is reuse through secondary markets. But this is really only for functional panels. So for that to happen, you've got the collection of the PV panel, land transport, storage, sorting, and then transport to a secondary market. And on Oahu or other islands, this is can happen. And as I mentioned, Reuse Hawaii is one of those places that's currently doing this. So moving on to our challenges and opportunities for addressing this PV panel waste. We've got currently there are no options for recycling this material on the island. There are very high shipping costs required for that shipping to the mainland. There is this lack of funding or increases to cost to consumers. There is a lack of centralized program or leadership to figure out how this material should be properly handled. There is currently lack of physical space for that sorting and processing and staging of those processes I just mentioned on the last slide. And owners are replacing panels earlier than needed. Installers and demolition contractors are not currently being held accountable to managing these materials responsibly. There is difficulties with implementing EPR. Niagara County has been doing this a little bit and has found anecdotally that it's been expensive, and there was some resistance to people being willing to sell panels to their jurisdiction because of the extra requirements that were put in place. The whole industry is actively watching. Right now, California is undergoing their own EPR sort of process, and they are a very large player in the PV panel kind of market and industry. And so what happens in California is probably going to dictate what happens in many other places from an EPR standpoint. The opportunities in this space are potentially subsidizing shipping costs to the mainland, providing or trying to go after EPA grant funding. The city could partner with agencies for a centralized program, which would also provide leadership to, have a good plan for this material. The city could potentially establish a physical space for the sorting and processing and staging of this material. There's an opportunity for education for owners to promote longer usage of panels. And there's an education opportunity for, doing O&M, which could also increase the lifespan of this material. So those are some source reduction, options that could happen just through education themselves. So let's cover each one of these considerations. This permitted interaction group had 7, and much like the first group, the first item identified was the evaluate funding strategies. Again, establishing new recycling and reuse programs requires money. So trying to get some of this EPA grant funding out there that could be utilized on an industry and consumer level to use that funding to be held accountable for the disposal and recycling. So possible solutions are have sustainable ongoing program funding for industry to consumer, all the way across the board from industry to consumers, manufacturers, retailers, operators, government, refuse operators, installers, and waste generators, all could go after portions of this funding. There could be options for expanding the tax credit for replacing PV panel systems, with a caveat requiring a fee for the disposal and recycling of the old system. And the city and or state could apply for grant funding just to help support any of the programs that are identified as other potential considerations. Oops, this one might have gotten a little out of order. Sorry about that. So the current PV panel waste strategies on Oahu, the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute has been doing research. Our group actually invited Dr. Cooney to some of our meetings, and there is a report that summarizes considerations on the waste management of clean energy projects in Hawaii. You can read it more at this link that you will get in the slides later. Dr. Cooney is currently working on a report for the planning and implementation of a statewide stewardship program. So that should be coming out in the near future or finalized in the near future. Inter-island solar supply recycling program is another speaker that our group talked with during our individual PIG meetings. They are Hawaii's largest wholesale panel distributor currently, and they are running this in-house recycling program through the partnership with a mainland recycler. In this program, they receive the panels at the end of life. They get sorted, packed, and shipped in containers of other panels to the mainland. And they've done a few containers so far, but the program does need to be expanded and more attractive to the market in order for this to really take off. But, it's a great example of someone taking, kind of control and defining a program on their own. And so with a little bit more coordination and leadership, that could certainly expand. Kumu Kit and Reuse Hawaii. There's this program for the secondary market and the redistribution of used panels to those who can't afford new ones. So that's another thing currently happening now. All right. Sorry, I got a little disorganized there. Back to consideration number 2. So the second consideration is to consider establishing sites for the collection, sorting, processing, and staging. And the challenge here, we've mentioned previously, is the lack of physical space for doing all of that sorting, processing, staging, etc., that's needed to prepare those materials to be shipped back to the mainland. This kind of activity also requires appropriate permits, so that can certainly be challenging as well. An example is the one I just mentioned, the Inter-Island Solar, who collects, sorts, processes, and stages panels on a small scale. So some possible solutions are the city or stakeholders could secure physical spaces for collection of this material. The city and or state could potentially offset costs for the commercial to incentivize dropping off of panels at these collection sites. The pilot project currently going on with the city and Reuse Hawaii to collect and redistribute household and construction waste could potentially, also include PV panel waste as well. So that's that pilot project mentioned in the previous PIG. So there's some connectivity there. Okay, so consideration number 3. This is considering establishing a statewide stewardship program. So it can be an extremely complex process for PV panel recycling. The example of the Inter-Island Solar Supply in-house recycling program, that they are a really small scale version of what needs to be scaled up on a statewide level. And some of the possible solutions discussed by this group were that Dr. Cooney, who just is preparing a lot of research in those reports I mentioned, recommended establishment of a statewide stewardship program to support PV panel recycling. There's a lot of different ways this could be done. One example is the program could be led by a 403B nonprofit organization with oversight from manufacturers and government agencies. Continued identification and maintenance of partnerships, and then funding could come from several levels, from either industry all the way down to the consumer level. And the industry, should continue to watch how California's program rolls out. There's a lot of, ways to organize and situate these kind of stewardship programs. I know that the state has tried kind of different kinds of stewardship programs with other materials. So I'm sure there are many, thoughts that we might discuss later about how this has worked in the past, but that'll have to hold till the next meeting. But just, something to consider more. And again, would certainly require more work to make it happen, but it is a consideration. The fourth consideration is to incentivize and educate owners about PV panel maintenance. The challenge is that panels are taken down and replaced sooner than they actually need to be, so before their lifespan is even up. Installers encourage the replacement of these panels due to new technologies. Owners are unaware of the proper panel maintenance to extend the life of their panels. So that's the challenge. An example is that the City and County of Honolulu's Department of Facility Maintenance and their Stormwater Quality Division had a public and education outreach program that was really successful for some stormwater management. So that could be used as just like an example of how, educational program has a big impact. So there's some possible solutions here: establishing an incentivization and education program, educating homeowners, commercial businesses, and installers on the proper maintenance and reuse options to incentivize leaving panels on until they die. And, that's just, the proper installation, regular maintenance, and cleaning are really important to increasing that lifespan. So that could all be part of, this educational program. Before I move on, I just want to check in with the group both online and virtually. Is everyone hearing me okay? Is seeing the slides?
I'm hearing.
Okay, excellent.
Good.
All right. Sorry if my voice isn't great. I am recuperating from a cold, so I'm trying to do my best here. All right. Number 4, incentivize and educate owners. Oops, we just spent that one. Sorry. Number 5, subsidizing shipping costs. So this one we've talked a lot about. Right now, there is no option to recycle PV panel waste on the island, so everything is shipped to the mainland. These shipping costs are pretty high. And this is due to a long distance and the fact that these materials are very heavy. There is that example program of Inter-Island Solar having that smaller scale program. And so right now they currently don't make a profit with this recycling program. They just do it to minimize waste stream. So that's pretty impressive that this company has decided to do that. But imagine if there was a bit more organized effort to do something similar, take those lessons learned and make it a larger program. So some possible solutions. If there's an industry to consumer level funding program, those funds could go towards subsidizing or recovering shipping costs for recyclers. The city or state could consider subsidizing these shipping costs, and individual consumers could potentially pay for a portion of those shipping costs. Someone that could work by someone replacing their system could pay a fee as part of that, and that could go towards these shipping costs. So there are a number of ways this could be done, but it certainly is a big item that needs to be addressed if a bigger program is undertaken. Item number 6 is exploring extended producer responsibility. So this is similar to a stewardship model, slightly different, but the challenge here is the lack of regulation and responsibility placed on producers. So EPR for PV panels, would probably be difficult to implement. There likely would be pushback from the industry. The manufacturers, which are the majority of those are international, could potentially pull out of the Hawaii market. So these are considerations and potential concerns of that. But there are some limited examples of PV panel EPR programs. Washington is the only state currently with a PV panel law. Niagara County, New York, is the only local government in the county with with PV panel EPR law. And some manufacturers have actually pulled out of those areas because they don't like operating in that environment. So again, it's something to consider. Some next steps for this consideration are, the state DOH could potentially explore EPR options a little bit more. There's some time and effort that should be put into running to ground these options a bit more, and also watching again the program that California ends up going forward to see how that's implemented, the impact it has on the market and all of that. They're a really big player in this overall industry, and so are likely going to lead the direction of what is next to come. All right. So moving on to consideration number 7. This one is supporting and incentivizing the secondary market program for reuse. So the challenge is that there are many used panels with life still left in them, but there's not enough demand to actually match up, how much is out there versus who all needs them. There's especially low demand for older panels with the older technology. An example that the group talked about was the Kumu Kit and the Reuse Hawaii Secondary Market Program, which has been very successful in rural areas in the Big Island. So that's a model that could potentially be considered as you're looking forward to, what a program on Oahu could look like. And a possible solution is use tax incentives for the panel receivers to increase the market demand. So, that there is again a potential example program out there, but then it could potentially use a little bit more incentivization just to help drive that demand. All right, so there's a couple of just some interesting kind of educational items out there that the group found that we've included in here just for some extra information from the group. Um, if you're interested in checking this out, we're not going to go into it in much detail today, but there is some interesting tools out there that talk a little bit about the circular economy of PV panels and you know what could be used with them as well. So this is an interesting resource to share. So then that brings us to our final permitted interaction group presentation. This group was a little different because if you recall from previous meetings, you know, there was some difficult decision making about what this last group would be. There was a lot of interest for both the topics of product packaging and food waste, and so we ended up combining them because there are some synergies between them. So this particular group was the product packaging and food waste and organics PIG. So this group approached things a little bit differently. There was a little bit more time going back to the integrated solid waste management plan and trying to really remind ourselves what, you know, some of the goals that were specifically identified in that plan. And so we felt like it was important to bring that finding forward here. The ones shown here are reducing the per capita waste generation 25% by the year 2030 from 6.5 pounds per day to 4.9 pounds per day. So, you know, that's looking at overall, you know, how much waste is generated by each person and trying to tackle, you know, the plan through just reducing the amount. So source reduction is a fantastic way to get at that, you know, waste generation reduction in general. The other goal in the plan was to reduce the carbon emissions from the waste stream by reducing or eliminating carbon-based single-use plastics and polystyrene from the waste stream. Specifically, the city has established a goal of reducing plastic waste going to H-Power and landfill by 1% from 10% to 9% by the year 2030. So, you know, both of these goals are really relevant to this, to many of the PIGs, but especially for this one. You know, food waste is a big component of every jurisdiction's waste stream. And then as you know, some of the packaging, since this is going after product packaging, you're looking at those single-use plastics and polystyrene and such, we felt these goals were very relevant to keep in mind. So a couple points to consider. Again, the topic for this permitted interaction group was product packaging, focused on food service related packaging and food waste and organics. We talked about the current state on Oahu. We talked about challenges and opportunities. We talked about the current strategies and policies, and then we came up with a number of considerations. We do have these broken up a little bit differently, and so as we go through the slides, we'll see that it's just this is how this permitted interaction group wanted to tackle this topic. So first, let's start with the current state of food waste and organics on Oahu. Previously, I did mention that 2017 waste composition study that was part of the integrated solid waste management plan. And that study was focused on the percentage and the disposed stream of certain materials by weight. So overall, organics are 35.5% of that disposed waste stream. It is the largest portion of any category in Honolulu's overall waste stream. The two most prevalent materials are food waste, which is non-vegetative, and food waste that's vegetative. So together, those two materials made up 20.1% of the overall waste stream. So again, big, big opportunity for impact here. This study looked at both kind of the residential and the commercial sector overall. For the residential, organics are 42.3% of that disposed waste stream, which is the largest portion of the residential waste stream. And for commercial, organics are 31.1%, also the largest portion of that waste stream. So on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see that the 10 most prevalent material type categories in the overall waste stream. And as you can see, for the first couple, food waste, uncorrugated cardboard, so that's goes along with the packaging, green waste, pallets, other organics. Then there's compostable paper, mixed recycling paper, plastic film, and treated wood. So a lot of very relevant materials for this permitted interaction group. So something to keep in mind as we move forward. So we just talked about the current state of food waste. What's the current state of product packaging? So this, again, this permitted interaction group focused on food related or foodware related product packaging. And unfortunately, the 2017 waste composition study did not have a category specific to that material. However, as I showed on the previous slide, there are some, potentially relevant ones like with the plastics and the cardboard and pallets and such. All right. So current food waste strategies and policies on Oahu. Broken up, let's look at the residential food waste first. So the city is implementing Bill 62. It has an implementation deadline of January 1st, 2024, and this is to handle the residential food waste. It will now cover food waste and green waste. And then there's recently an RFP for residential food and green waste collection and processing. And this recently went out. So this is part of this bill and how the city is planning to meet that implementation deadline. For commercial food waste, the city wastewater engineering is looking into treating commercial food waste at wastewater treatment plants. Right now, it's still in the very early planning phases of this. City is also looking to expand a law for commercial food-based generators required to divert food waste. There's currently the Chinatown pilot project going on as part of the Oahu compost project. And there's a link here if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. But what this is focusing on is food diversion from Chinatown restaurants that are getting sent to a compost facility. So again, another opportunity to learn here from a pilot project that's underway, but could certainly be expanded upon if the pilot project is successful. So what is the current product packaging strategies and policies on Oahu? So there's the Disposable Foodware Ordinance, the DFWO. This ordinance affects all food vendors and businesses operating within the city and county of Honolulu. It does amend the Oahu plastics bag ban and restricts the use and sale of polystyrene, foam foodware, disposable plastic foodware, and disposable plastic serviceware. So there's a bit more on the ordinance here, but that is currently in place. You can see kind of some examples of what they're talking about as serviceware and disposable plastic serviceware, and then disposable plastic foodware and polystyrene foam foodware. So those pictures hopefully provide a little bit more information about what we're talking about when we use those terms. So what are the current needs? So for food waste, we need more focus on the higher portions of this food recovery hierarchy. So this upside down triangle or pyramid probably looks similar to one you've seen for the overall waste stream, but it builds it out just a little bit more. So, those upper sections of here, we're talking about source reduction and reuse, feeding hungry people, feeding animals, then moving on to industrial uses, composting, landfill incineration. So, really trying to get at those higher portions, from source reduction to feeding hungry people and animals, as part of this source reduction. For food related packaging, there are some existing ordinances that we just talked about, but there are challenges with implementation of those. The types of plastic foodware provided to customers is not regulated under the DFWO. The polypropylene containers do not fit the definition of disposable plastic in the ordinance. And, there's needed some better infrastructure to support reusable container use. So those are some of the current needs. All right, so considerations. Now, this group did kind of bucket the considerations in two different categories. So the first group that we're going to go through are the ones related to the foodware, and then the second are the ones related to the food waste and organics. So considerations for foodware are seek EPA funding. Foodware have reusable container and mobile washing program, and that would include establishing a policy exemption for mobile dishwashing service to not require commercial kitchen connection. So currently that's sort of a limitation. If you were to have a mobile dishwashing service that went out and was able to help some of the places that are providing these reusable containers, they currently would have to have a commercial kitchen connection. Another part of this consideration is adding some education, launching a pilot project, and then launching a program. And then for the food waste ones, we have increasing food donations, doing this through incentivizing food donations with an award or certificate. So, a business that is really doing a great job of food donation, they could apply for this award or certificate. There would need to be another educational program launched, and then some potential updates to the Good Samaritan law. So one of the things the group did look at is what the law currently says, and it's designed to protect companies, businesses that are donating food. However, there are some updated language changes that could be proposed to make it work smoother. And then another one for food waste is increasing food recycling, and that's all organics and composting. So that's expanding the ordinance, Chapter 22, Section 42, 3.5, which covers mandatory food waste recycling, and then establishing an organics and composting task force. So let's go over those in a little bit more detail. Seeking EPA funding, much like the other ones. Everyone's very interested in this large amount of EPA funding out there. And recently, the County of Hawaii was awarded $1.5 million for a city-scale reusable foodware and refillable bottle system in Hilo. So, that's an example of a pretty nearby successful program that could be modeled after. This EPA funding that we're talking about has multiple cycles and years that this funding is going to be available for. So something to consider. City and County of Honolulu is well positioned to apply for the next round of funding. So solutions are applying for that funding and potentially maybe developing some partnerships with stakeholders to go after other funding. This funding could support the reusable foodware program, the education program, incentivization of that food donation and food recycling program, and establishing of organics and composting task force. So all of those things take money. So it would be great to get a little bit more support to push those things forward. All right. So we've got this group decided we wanted to, look at things a little bit differently. And so we've got looking at breaking down the seeking EPA funding. So, we want to go after this EPA funding. There is the packaging strategies that could utilize it, and they could utilize that funding for the mobile dishwashing and food serviceware program, or for looking at the packaging of materials in general. And then under the food waste strategies, that funding could be used to increase food donations and improve organics composting. So looking at the food serviceware, reusable container, and mobile washing program a little bit further. The opportunity, so Zero Waste Oahu, one of our source reduction members, represented by Nicole, has reusable containers from my prior pilot project. These could be used for doing another program or in other ways as well. So the challenges are that barrier in the previous project was that there was the lack of access to washing facilities. So, you have all these great reusable containers, but then in order for them to be reusable, they need to be conveniently washed. So that was the previous barrier. Policy language states that food trucks and mobile dishwashing services need to be connected to a brick and mortar commercial kitchen. So that's the current challenge. There's some examples of some successful programs out there. You can click on these links if you want to learn a little bit more about them, but a couple examples here are the New Zealand mobile wash truck program, and they're using their wash truck to, help make their reusable containers successful programs. And then the Oregon Convention Center, they have their own reusable container program, and they've been implementing it a little differently. So a couple different ways to potentially tackle this problem. Solutions here, we've listed establishing policy language with an exemption for mobile dishwashing services to not require a commercial kitchen connection. So that would, remove that barrier. Increasing the amount of education that is done around reusable containers, how a program would work, the benefits of having this sort of a program. And then launching a pilot project to first be focused on large events. You could really test how something like this would work if you targeted those big, large events to use these containers, see how you could learn from that, what other things need to be, any kinks worked out before you move on and launch an actual program. That would be the final step. So again, this group tried to, put a potential implementation plan sort of together. It's a 3-year plan for this packaging priority or the mobile dishwashing exemption. In this first 2023 year, you would draft the language for the regulation or policy change. You would identify a coalition for the policy, identify resources and infrastructure needed, and then you'd start your coalition education, which would include tours and other things like that. Then you would have the next year in 2024, you could actually start your regulation or policy change process, finalize the policy change, apply for grant funding for a pilot project, and then start your public education. And then in the year 2025, you could implement this pilot project. And for future kind of recommendations, we've got future years out here a little bit further. So in 2026, you could incentivize this 100 people or more events to utilize the reusable serviceware and the mobile dishwashing unit. You could in 2027, have some more funding, seek grant provider to fund the development of a mobile dishwashing unit, potentially in town storage. And again, 2025, you would launch that pilot program. And then for packaging materials, it would in 2026 you tackle the policy piece, which you create a task force or extend the source reduction working group to look at the current state and recommendations for next steps of that could include like EPR, some projects around pallets and things like that. So these are some potential future recommendations to consider. Under the next item, the food waste item that involved increased food donations. So the current policy or the Good Samaritan law protects good faith food donors from civil and criminal liability and encourages food donations. The challenges are that more businesses could donate food, but they don't. Some businesses are not aware of the donor liability protections in place. The Good Samaritan law language currently excludes individuals from donating food. So currently donors must have a commercial kitchen with a specified requirement. So potential solutions around these challenges are incentivizing food donations at businesses with an award or certificate, launching a public education program, and potentially updating Good Samaritan law language to be more inclusive of individuals as well. So the group, again, kind of put together a potential 3-year plan of what you could potentially do if you wanted to move forward with this. Again, this is talking about, food donations and incentivizing food donations through awards for business owners. So in 2023, you would identify your resources and your infrastructure that would be needed for this program. In 2024, you would identify what agency might give this award, and then write grants to seek funding to make this program successful, identify what is needed for a gold star or an award of this magnitude, and then public education about this new program. In 2025, you would start issuing those awards to business owners. Okay, moving on to the next consideration. That this one is focused on food waste and increasing food recycling. And so the current policy, Ordinance Chapter 42, Section 4235, is the mandatory food waste recycling. It requires businesses of a certain size to send food waste to recycling facilities. The opportunity here is the policy language change could increase food recycling by requiring additional sizes of businesses to separate food waste and send it to recycling facilities. So where it's currently limited to a certain size now, you'd expand that so that you're covering a larger group. Some potential solutions here are expanding Ordinance Chapter 42, Section 4235 to require more businesses to send food waste to recycling facilities, establish an organics and composting task force, and this task force would focus on efforts and discussion around this topic. So here are some, potential future recommendations for this packaging item. Again, we've got the mobile dishwashing service and the packaging materials both shown here. But again, we would, incentivize these 2 programs through different policy and education. So a couple of other resources we wanted to point out to this group, similar to the other PIGs. There's a lot of tools out there of interest. EPA has quite a few that are focused on preventing and diverting wasted food. There's some on social marketing campaigns. They include toolkits to prevent wasted food and compost food scraps. The toolkits can be used to design behavior change campaigns for Oahu. There is a food waste assessment guidebook. There's a packaging waste prevention tool, some paper tracking waste logs, and there is the waste reduction model warm tool that also shows impacts of diverting food waste as well. So lots of great resources out there. All right, making really good progress here. Hope everybody's doing okay, listening to my voice for a while. That concludes our permitted interaction group presentations. And again, just a reminder that this meeting is really informational only. Next meeting is when we can have our discussion and our decision making. But today was to try to get everyone on the same page. You're going to have access to the slides, and you have opportunity to go out and check any of those links as well. And then we'll all reconvene again shortly to have more discussion and talk about this more next week. So that brings us to our scheduling announcements for the next meeting. So here is our overall meeting flow here. We've successfully completed meeting 1 and 2. We formed our PIGs after meeting 2, had several different PIG meetings. We are in the midst of meeting 3 right now. And after meeting 3, that's when the PIGs are going to be formally dissolved. So those PIGs won't be meeting anymore. And then next week, we'll have meeting number 4. And in that meeting, this is where, the group can finalize recommendations on those topics that we just discussed today. The goal of meeting 4 is to come away with enough information that we can then put together this draft source reduction working group report, which is designed to really summarize all of the proceedings that happened during this working group, and then also the kind of recommendations that the group decides to move forward with, and hopefully outlines also, at least a pathway for picking up where the group leaves off and keeping some of these actions going past the meeting 5. So again, we'll put together the draft report, which you'll get in advance of meeting 5. It'll be important that you read that and then be ready, hopefully share your comments prior to meeting 5, so then we can figure out how to address those and finalize the report. And that will conclude the working group. So we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, but we were able to cover quite a lot of material. Hopefully this gives you a lot to consider. If there's any kind of clarifying questions that anyone has, we could open it up to the source reduction working group members now to address those. But again, remember, we have to keep that limited to just sort of clarifying questions and hold discussion and, decision kind of comments for the next meeting. Does anybody have any questions they wanted to cover? Feel free to take your mic off mute or put them in the chat. It looks like Mike O'Keefe did put a nice link to some more resources in the chat. And to answer your question, Dean Uchida, yes, the PowerPoint will be posted to the source reduction working group website after this meeting, and will be up soon. Any questions? Okay, well, I don't think so. So I guess we'll give you back a little bit of your day here. I just want to give you a huge, I really appreciate you making time for coming to all of the meetings so far and all of the time that you've put forward into those permitted interaction groups and showing up today. Looking really forward to the discussion at the next meeting and hopefully coming forward with some really solid recommendations that the group can feel positive about and moving the source reduction needle in the right direction. And we can adjourn the meeting today. And thanks again
Lindsay.
for showing up.
Lindsay, there's a question in,
Oh.
in the room here.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no. Oh, okay, okay, I'm sorry.
We're good, Lindsay.
You're good? Okay. Well, with that, then let's formally adjourn the meeting. And thanks again for showing up. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Good job, Lindsay. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.